When Colonel Marcus Rivera spotted the small figure in oversized military fatigues standing outside the Combat Training Center at 0500 hours, he assumed someone's daughter had wandered away from family housing during the early morning drills. But 9-year-old Sarah Chen wasn't lost. She was exactly where she intended to be, clutching her application for the Advanced Combat Readiness program and demanding enrollment in training that had never accepted anyone under 16. And when the battle-hardened base commander made what he thought was a simple wager that she couldn't survive 1 week of modified training, he had no idea he was about to witness the most remarkable display of tactical brilliance in Fort Bragg's 70-year history. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story inspires you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have something truly special planned for you. The North Carolina morning mist clung to Fort Bragg's sprawling training complex when Colonel Marcus Rivera first noticed the child standing at perfect attention beside the combat center entrance. His pre-dawn inspection route had taken him through the familiar network of barracks and training facilities, past the firing ranges where soldiers would soon begin their daily weapons qualifications. At 52, Rivera maintained the same rigid discipline that had carried him through 3 decades of military service, including 2 combat deployments, that had earned him the Silver Star and Bronze Star with Valor. The sight of the small figure brought him to an immediate halt. The child wore military-style clothing that hung loosely on her slight frame, but she maintained a posture that suggested familiarity with military protocol. In her hands, she held what appeared to be official paperwork, and her dark eyes tracked his approach with intensity that seemed unusually focused for someone her age. "Can I help you?" Rivera asked, his voice carrying the authority of command even in casual inquiry. The girl's shoulders squared further. "Yes, sir. I'm here to see you, Colonel Rivera." The formality in her response surprised him. Most children on the base addressed him with a casual respect their parents encouraged, but this one spoke with the precision of someone who understood military hierarchy. "I'm Sarah Chen," she continued before he could respond. "My father was Master Sergeant David Chen, Special Forces, 3rd Group. He was killed in action 18 months ago." The name registered immediately. Rivera remembered David Chen well, an exceptional soldier who had died during a high-risk rescue operation in Afghanistan. The memorial service had drawn hundreds of attendees, and Rivera recalled meeting the widow and daughter briefly during that solemn ceremony. But this composed child before him bore little resemblance to the grief-stricken little girl he remembered from that day. "Sarah," he said, his tone softening slightly, "what brings you here?" She extended the paperwork toward him with both hands, the gesture formal and respectful. "I want to join the Advanced Combat Readiness program, sir. I've prepared my application and supporting documentation." Rivera accepted the folder, though his eyebrows rose at her words. The Advanced Combat Readiness program was an elite initiative he'd established 8 months earlier, designed to provide the most capable soldiers with cutting-edge tactical training. It was intended for experienced personnel, typically those with at least 5 years of service and exceptional performance records. No one under 16 had ever applied, and certainly no child. He opened the folder and found a meticulously completed application form. Below it lay copies of her father's service record, including commendations and performance evaluations that documented an exemplary military career. At the bottom was a typed essay explaining her motivation. "Did you complete this yourself?" Rivera asked, indicating the application. "Yes, sir. My mother helped me with military terminology, but all the content is mine." Rivera scanned the essay carefully. Sarah had written, "I want to honor my father's sacrifice by developing the tactical skills and mental discipline that made him an effective Special Forces operator. I believe rigorous training will help me understand the profession he died serving and prepare me to continue his legacy of protecting others." The words, despite their careful construction, carried emotional weight that made Rivera pause. He looked up to find Sarah watching him steadily, her expression revealing nothing of what she might be thinking. "Sarah," he began carefully, "this program is designed for experienced soldiers. The physical and mental requirements would be challenging for grown men with years of training." "I'm prepared for the challenge, sir," she replied immediately. "I've been conditioning myself for 8 months. I can complete a 5-mile run in under 40 minutes. Perform 50 push-ups without stopping, and I've memorized the soldier's creed." Rivera found himself both impressed and concerned by her preparation. The determination in her voice was unmistakable. But the program she was requesting involved advanced combat simulations, weapons training, and tactical exercises that would test experienced soldiers. The minimum qualification for this program requires completion of advanced individual training, he explained. "That's not arbitrary. It's based on demonstrated military competency." Sarah's expression didn't waver, though something in her eyes suggested she'd anticipated this response. "Sir, with respect, my father earned his Green Beret at age 19. If Special Forces believed he was ready for elite training at that age, couldn't you consider that his daughter might be ready to begin learning those same principles 10 years earlier?" The logic was flawed, but the conviction behind it was compelling. Rivera closed the folder and studied the child before him, recognizing something familiar in her bearing. It was the same determined focus he'd seen in countless soldiers who refused to accept conventional limitations. Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes appeared around the corner of the building, her combat uniform indicating she was heading to the training facility. Hayes was one of Rivera's most trusted personnel, responsible for overseeing the advanced combat program among her other duties. She noticed the unusual scene and approached with curiosity evident in her expression. "Colonel," she greeted him, then nodded to Sarah. "Sergeant Major Hayes, this is Sarah Chen. She's requesting admission to the advanced program." Hayes's eyebrows rose as she assessed Sarah's size and apparent age. "I see. What's your evaluation of her application, sir?" Rivera felt caught between military regulation and the undeniable force of the child's determination. Part of him wanted to send Sarah home with gentle encouragement to pursue age-appropriate activities. But another part recognized something exceptional in her approach: the systematic preparation, the formal presentation, the unwavering conviction. "Her application is thorough," he admitted. "Her motivation is clear. But she's 9 years old, Sergeant Major. 9.5. Sarah corrected quietly. Hayes suppressed what might have been a smile. "That's quite significant," she said. "What kind of preparation have you undertaken, Sarah?" "Every morning I run 5 miles before school. I practice martial arts 3 times per week. I've studied tactical manuals and can field strip an M4 carbine." "Blindfolded," Sarah replied. "Field strip an M4?" Hayes asked, clearly surprised. Without hesitation, Sarah began reciting the disassembly procedure with technical precision that demonstrated genuine knowledge rather than mere memorization. Rivera and Hayes exchanged glances, both recognizing that this level of preparation went far beyond childish enthusiasm. When Sarah finished, she stood waiting for their response, her hands clasped behind her back in a modified parade rest position. "That's impressive," Hayes said finally. "Where did you learn weapons procedures?" "My father's teammates have been teaching me," Sarah replied. "They said understanding equipment was essential for tactical thinking." Rivera felt something shift in his assessment of the situation. This wasn't simply a child's unrealistic request. It was a daughter's systematic attempt to connect with her father's legacy through the profession he had served. "Sarah," he said slowly, "even if I were inclined to consider an exception to our requirements, this program includes activities that could be dangerous for someone your size. Live fire exercises, combat simulations, advanced tactical scenarios. Understand the risks, sir. I'm not asking you to modify the standards. I'm asking for the opportunity to prove I can meet them." The phrase struck Rivera as remarkably mature, and he realized this conversation had moved beyond routine policy enforcement. Sarah wasn't requesting special treatment. She was proposing to earn her place through demonstrated capability. Hayes stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. "Colonel, what if we structured an evaluation period? A controlled assessment to determine her readiness before making any long-term commitments?" Rivera considered this suggestion, recognizing the wisdom in Hayes's approach. An evaluation period would allow objective assessment of Sarah's capabilities while avoiding immediate rejection that might crush her determination. "What kind of evaluation are you suggesting?" he asked. "1 week of modified training," Hayes replied. "Basic tactical assessment, weapons familiarity, physical conditioning, leadership exercises. Nothing dangerous, but comprehensive enough to evaluate her potential." Sarah's eyes brightened slightly, though she maintained her formal posture. "I would be grateful for any opportunity to demonstrate my commitment, sir." Rivera found himself genuinely impressed by her composure. Most adults would have shown more emotion when facing potential rejection, but Sarah remained focused on her objective throughout their conversation. Yet he also recognized the potential complications. The other participants in the advanced program were experienced soldiers with years of training. The physical demands that challenged grown men could overwhelm a child, regardless of her preparation. More concerning, the psychological pressure of competing with adult soldiers might undermine her confidence rather than building it. There would have to be strict conditions, he said, thinking aloud. Medical clearance, parental consent, modified. Objectives that account for your age and experience level. "My mother has already provided written consent," Sarah said, producing another document from her folder. "And Dr. Martinez cleared me for intensive physical activity last week." Rivera accepted the additional paperwork, shaking his head at the thoroughness of her preparation. The medical clearance was properly notarized, and the parental consent form demonstrated the same careful attention to detail as the application. "You've anticipated every question," he observed. "My father always said proper preparation prevents poor performance," Sarah replied. "I wanted to be ready for any concerns you might have." The reference to her father's advice carried additional weight for Rivera, who recognized the phrase as standard military wisdom. It suggested that David Chen had shared more than just technical knowledge with his daughter. He had passed along the practical philosophy that successful soldiers use to overcome challenges. Hayes moved to Rivera's side, speaking quietly enough that Sarah couldn't hear. "Sir, I think we should consider this seriously. Her level of preparation suggests genuine commitment, and the evaluation period would let us assess her safely." Rivera nodded, recognizing the validity of Hayes's assessment. Sarah's unusual request didn't automatically disqualify it, and her demonstration of preparation suggested she deserved more than a dismissive response. "Sarah," he said, raising his voice to include her again, "I'm going to make you an offer. 1 week of modified training starting Monday. If you can demonstrate capability to meet adjusted standards, we'll discuss your continued participation." The first genuine smile Rivera had seen crossed Sarah's face, transforming her serious expression into something more recognizably childlike. "Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. The standards will still be demanding," he warned. "Sergeant Major Hayes will design assessments that test your capabilities fairly but thoroughly. You'll be expected to maintain military bearing, follow orders precisely, and complete every task to the best of your ability." "I understand, sir." Rivera found himself making an impulsive decision, one he would later recognize as the moment everything changed. "In fact, I'm so confident this will demonstrate why we have experience requirements that I'll make a wager. If you can successfully complete 1 week of modified training and meet the adjusted standards, I'll personally recommend your acceptance into the full program." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "And if I can't, then you agree to wait until you're 16 and have proper military experience before reapplying," Rivera replied. "Fair enough. Yes, sir. Thank you for this opportunity." As Sarah gathered her folder and prepared to leave, Rivera realized he had just committed to something unprecedented in his military career. He was about to put a 9-year-old through combat-style training based on nothing more than her determination and his curiosity about the limits of human potential. Hayes waited until Sarah was out of earshot before speaking. "You realize what you just agreed to?" "I agreed to give a determined child the chance to honor her father's memory," Rivera replied, "and to prove that our requirements exist for good reasons." "What if she succeeds?" Rivera watched Sarah's small figure disappear around the corner, still moving with that precise military bearing that had first caught his attention. "Then I suppose we'll have to reconsider what we think we know about capability and preparation." The morning mist was beginning to lift from the training grounds, revealing the obstacle courses and equipment that would soon test Sarah's resolve. Rivera had no idea he had just initiated events that would challenge not only a 9-year-old's abilities, but his own assumptions about leadership, legacy, what it truly meant to honor those who had served. As he walked toward his office, Rivera found himself already wondering whether he had made a terrible mistake or opened the door to something extraordinary. Monday would provide the answer, but for now he could only wait and hope that his confidence in military tradition would prove justified. The morning's encounter had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it had set in motion a week that would transform not only Sarah Chen, but everyone who witnessed her attempt to prove that courage, determination, and proper preparation could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. What none of them could have anticipated was just how dramatically she was about to exceed every expectation they thought they understood. Creating and preparing this story took considerable effort. If you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our channel. It means everything to us. Now, back to the story. News of Colonel Rivera's agreement with 9-year-old Sarah Chen spread through Fort Bragg's military community like wildfire. By Sunday evening, less than 48 hours after their encounter, most of the base had heard some version of the story. Details varied wildly depending on the source. Some claimed the colonel had lost his judgment. Others insisted it was a publicity stunt, and a few suggested that grief had driven the Chen family to pursue something dangerous and inappropriate. Linda Chen stood at her kitchen window, watching her daughter complete what had become a nightly routine. In the backyard of their on-base housing unit, Sarah moved through a series of exercises with mechanical precision. Push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, followed by what appeared to be tactical movement drills she'd learned from her father's former teammates. The sight both impressed and worried Linda, who recognized her late husband's intensity in their daughter's focused determination. The phone had been ringing constantly all weekend. Other military spouses calling with mixtures of concern and curiosity, wanting to know if the rumors were true. Linda had handled each call with practiced diplomacy, neither confirming nor denying specifics while defending her decision to support Sarah's request. The conversations had been exhausting, forcing her to articulate motivations she was still processing herself. "Sarah, dinner's ready," she called through the screen door. Her daughter completed one final set of mountain climbers before jogging to the house, her face flushed, but her breathing controlled. At 9 years old, Sarah possessed endurance that surprised even Linda, who had watched her daughter's physical capabilities develop steadily over the past 8 months. They ate in relative silence, Sarah's mind clearly occupied with tomorrow's challenges. Linda studied her daughter's profile, noting the way she held herself even while sitting spine straight, shoulders squared, an unconscious mimicry of military bearing that had become second nature since David's death. "Are you nervous?" "Linda, Asked finally, Sarah considered the question seriously before responding. A little, but Dad always said nervousness was just energy that needed direction. The casual reference to her father's wisdom had become commonplace in their household, though it never failed to create a small ache in Linda's chest. David's influence on their daughter remained strong despite his absence, transmitted through memories and principles that Sarah seemed determined to preserve and embody. "What if tomorrow doesn't go the way you hope?" Linda pressed gently. "Then I'll know I gave my best effort," Sarah replied. That's all anyone can ask. The maturity of her response struck Linda as both admirable and concerning. 9-year-olds shouldn't have to demonstrate such philosophical acceptance of potential failure. Yet Sarah's perspective reflected lessons learned through loss that most children her age couldn't comprehend. After dinner, he reviewed Sarah's preparations. 1. Final time. Her gear was laid out with military precision: physical training clothes, water bottle, notebook, and tactical gloves that had been a gift from her father's team. Everything was clean, organized, and ready for tomorrow's test. "Remember, Linda?" said as she tucked Sarah into bed. "Colonel Rivera and Sergeant Major Hayes want you to succeed. They're not trying to make this impossible." "I know, Mom, but even if they were, I'd still try my hardest." Linda kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the combination of childlike innocence and adult determination that defined Sarah's personality. As she turned off the light, she wondered whether she was supporting her daughter's healthy development or enabling something that might ultimately harm her. Across the base, Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes sat in her quarters, reviewing the training modifications she designed for Sarah's evaluation week. The challenge had been creating assessments that would legitimately test a 9-year-old's capabilities. Without setting her up for obvious failure, Hayes had spent most of Sunday consulting fitness standards, child development research, and her own experience working with young soldiers. The program she developed focused on fundamental skills rather than raw physical power, agility courses instead of obstacle walls, marksmanship with training weapons rather than live ammunition, tactical thinking exercises that emphasized problem solving. Over strength, each component was designed to evaluate qualities that military service required while acknowledging the biological limitations of Sarah's age and size. The assessment would be fair but demanding, providing legitimate evaluation of her potential without creating unnecessary danger. Hayes's phone buzzed with a text from Staff Sergeant Miguel Torres, the senior instructor who would assist with Sarah's training, ready for tomorrow's experiment. The message read, she typed back, "Ready to see what proper motivation can accomplish." Torres's response came quickly. "Hope you're right. Whole base is watching this one." The pressure of scrutiny concerned Hayes more than the actual training challenges. Sarah would be performing under intense observation from personnel who ranged from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. Managing that environment while conducting fair assessments would require careful attention to every detail of the week's activities. Her own motivation for supporting Sarah's request was complex. Hayes had grown up in a military family herself, the daughter of a Marine gunnery sergeant who had encouraged her to pursue goals that others considered inappropriate for women. She recognized something familiar in Sarah's determination, a refusal to accept limitations based on others' expectations, rather than personal capabilities. At the same time, Hayes understood Colonel Rivera's position. Military training existed within carefully structured parameters for good reasons, and exceptions to those standards could create dangerous precedents. If Sarah failed dramatically, it would reinforce existing policies. But if she succeeded, it might force uncomfortable questions about other assumptions that governed. Military culture Monday arrived with clear skies and temperatures that promised another warm North Carolina day. Sarah awoke before her alarm, completing her usual morning routine with extra attention to detail. She braided her hair tightly, ensuring it would stay neat during physical activity. Her training clothes were spotless, her boots properly laced. Her posture deliberately erect as she ate breakfast. Linda drove her to the base gates, both of them unusually quiet during the short trip. The gravity of what Sarah was attempting settled over them like a weight, transforming their normal, easy conversation into contemplative silence. "I love you," Linda said as they reached the entrance to the training facility. "Whatever happens. Today, I'm proud of you for trying. Love you too, Mom. See you tonight." Sarah walked through the gates with her shoulders back and her chin up, her small figure moving with purpose toward an uncertain but significant test of everything she believed about herself and her father's legacy: the Advanced Combat Readiness program typically conducted activities at Training Complex Alpha, a state-of-the-art facility designed for elite military instruction. Hayes had modified the location for Sarah's evaluation, choosing instead Training Area Bravo, which offered more appropriate scale and safer conditions for a younger participant. When Sarah arrived at the designated meeting point, she found Sergeant Major Hayes waiting alongside Staff Sergeant Torres and two other personnel she didn't recognize. All of them studied her with expressions that ranged from curious to doubtful, though Hayes's nod was encouraging. "Good morning, Sarah," Hayes said formally. "Are you ready to begin?" "Yes, Sergeant Major," Sarah replied, her voice clear and confident. Torres stepped forward, his bearing unmistakably that of a veteran instructor. At 34, he possessed the kind of weathered authority that came from years of training soldiers. And his initial assessment of Sarah was frankly skeptical. "Before we start," he announced, "I want to make sure you understand what you've committed to. This isn't summer camp or playground time. For the next week, you'll be held to military standards of performance and behavior. Do you understand?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Sarah responded immediately. Torres's eyebrows rose slightly at her correct use of his rank. "Have you been taught military?" "Protocol. My father taught me the basics, and I've been studying on my own." "What's the most important principle of following orders?" Without hesitation, Sarah replied, "Orders are to be followed immediately and completely unless they violate law or moral principles." Torres exchanged glances with Hayes, clearly surprised by the accuracy and completeness of her response. The answer demonstrated not only memorization but understanding of the complex relationship between obedience and ethical responsibility that formed the foundation of military discipline. "That's correct," he acknowledged. "Today, we'll be conducting baseline assessments of your physical capabilities and your ability to follow instructions under pressure. Are you ready to begin?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." The first test was a modified physical fitness assessment designed to establish Sarah's current capabilities across multiple areas, instead of the standard Army physical fitness test Hayes had created. Evaluations that measured relative performance rather than absolute standards. Sarah began with push-ups, completing 32 in proper form before reaching muscle failure. The number impressed the observing personnel, though they tried not to show their reactions. Next came sit-ups, where she managed 45 in 2 minutes, again exceeding expectations of adults who had assumed her preparation was more enthusiasm. Then substance, the running assessment proved most revealing. Rather than a traditional 2-mile run, Hayes had designed a 1-mile course that included varied terrain and elevation changes. Sarah completed it in 7 minutes and 38 seconds, a time that would have been respectable for many adult soldiers. Throughout each assessment, maintained the focused intensity that had characterized her initial meeting with Colonel Rivera. She asked no questions, made no complaints, and accepted each new challenge with the same steady determination. Torres found his skepticism beginning to waver as he watched her performance. The child was clearly in exceptional physical condition for her age, but more significantly, she demonstrated the kind of mental discipline that many adult recruits struggled to develop. Impressive, Hayes commented quietly as Sarah finished her assessments. Her preparation wasn't exaggerated. No, Torres agreed reluctantly. It wasn't. The morning's activities concluded with what Hayes called military bearing instruction. Essentially, a class in proper posture, movement, and protocol. Sarah absorbed the information quickly, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated both attention and understanding as they broke for lunch. Hayes noticed that several other personnel had gathered at the edges of the training area ostensibly, engaged in their own activities, but clearly observing Sarah's progress. Word was spreading that the 9-year-old's performance was exceeding expectations, generating curiosity among soldiers who had initially dismissed her attempt as futile. Colonel Rivera appeared during the afternoon session, maintaining professional distance while observing Sarah's work on modified tactical exercises. She navigated the scenarios with impressive analytical thinking, completing each challenge successfully, though often requiring more time than experienced soldiers would need. "How is she doing?" Rivera asked Hayes during a brief break. "Better than I expected," Hayes admitted. "Her physical capabilities are genuinely impressive, and her attitude has been exemplary." Rivera watched Sarah discussing technique with Torres, noting the serious way she absorbed his feedback and immediately attempted to implement his suggestions. There was nothing childish about her approach to the training, nothing that suggested she was treating it as play rather than serious preparation. "Any concerns?" he asked. "Only about the pressure she's under," Hayes replied. "Half the base is watching this, and that's a lot of attention for anyone, let alone a 9-year-old. As if responding to their conversation, Sarah chose that moment to attempt a particularly challenging tactical problem. She moved through it methodically until the final element, where her shorter reach made it impossible to complete the task as designed. Rather than giving up, she analyzed the problem and developed an alternative approach that achieved the same objective through different means. The creative problem-solving impressed both officers, demonstrating that Sarah's capabilities extended beyond simple physical preparation to include the kind of adaptive thinking that military service required. "She's not just meeting expectations," Rivera observed. "She's redefining them." The first day concluded with what Hayes described as an after-action review, essentially a conversation about the day's lessons and tomorrow's challenges. Sarah participated thoughtfully, asking questions about techniques she wanted to improve, and offering observations about her own performance that showed remarkable self-awareness. As she prepared to leave, Torres approached her with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to cautious respect. "You did well today," he said simply. "Tomorrow will be more challenging." "I'm looking forward to it, Staff Sergeant," Sarah replied, walking to the gate where her mother waited. As Sarah reflected on the day's experiences, she felt tired but satisfied, confident that her preparation had served her well, but aware that she had proven nothing yet beyond her ability to meet basic standards. What she didn't know was that her performance had already begun to change minds throughout Fort Bragg, forcing personnel to reconsider assumptions they had held without question. The real test wouldn't be whether she could complete the week successfully, but whether the base was ready to accept what her success might mean for their understanding of capability, determination, and the true legacy of those who served. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had established that Sarah Chen was far more than a grieving child playing its soldier. She was a serious competitor who would earn the right to continue proving herself one day at a time. Tuesday's training began with an unexpected development that would test Sarah's mental resilience as much as her physical capabilities. Master Sergeant Robert Kane, the program's most demanding instructor, arrived at the training facility with a reputation for breaking soldiers twice Sarah's size and a clear intention to prove that accommodating a 9-year-old was a dangerous mistake. Kane had requested permission to evaluate Sarah personally after hearing reports about her first-day performance. His 23 years of military service included multiple combat deployments and a distinguished record of training special operations personnel. His assessment of Sarah would carry significant weight in determining whether her trial week continued when Sarah reported for duty at 0530 hours. She found Kane waiting with an expression that conveyed skepticism bordering on hostility. His initial briefing made clear that he intended to test her limits in ways that would either validate her capabilities or expose them as inadequate for military training. "Today, we focus on mental toughness," Kane announced to the small group. "Physical ability means nothing without psychological resilience. You'll face scenarios designed to test your decision-making under stress, your ability to lead others, and your capacity to maintain performance when conditions become difficult." Sarah listened with the same focused attention she had displayed throughout her trial. Though Sergeant Major Hayes noticed a slight tension in her posture that suggested awareness of Kane's hostile attitude, 9-year-old had clearly recognized that today would be different from her initial assessment. The first exercise involved what Kane called stress inoculation training. Sarah would direct a team of volunteer soldiers through tactical scenarios while Kane introduced unexpected complications, conflicting information, and psychological pressure designed to overwhelm her decision-making processes. The volunteer team included 3 experienced soldiers who had agreed to participate in the evaluation. Specialist Jennifer Lopez, combat medic with 2 deployments; Corporal Michael Thompson, an infantry soldier with extensive training experience; and Private First Class David Kim, a recent graduate of advanced individual training. Kane had specifically chosen these participants to create maximum challenge. For Sarah, Lopez and Thompson possessed enough experience to question orders from someone they might consider unqualified, while Kim's recent training made him likely to defer to anyone in authority regardless of their qualifications. "Your mission," Kane explained to Sarah, "is to lead this team through a reconnaissance scenario. You'll receive initial intelligence, but conditions will change rapidly. Your team's success depends on your ability to adapt plans, communicate effectively, and maintain unit cohesion under pressure." Sarah studied the tactical map Kane provided, noting terrain features, potential threats, and mission objectives with the same methodical approach she had used throughout her trial. Her analysis revealed strategic thinking that impressed the observing personnel, though Kane maintained his skeptical expression. "Questions?" Kane asked. "What are the rules of engagement? And what communication assets do we have available?" Sarah replied immediately. The tactical questions demonstrated understanding of military planning principles that surprised even Kane, though he concealed his reaction behind professional neutrality. Her inquiries focused on practical considerations that experienced soldiers would prioritize. "Standard row, limited communication with headquarters," Kane replied. "You have 15 minutes to brief your team and begin execution." Sarah turned to address her assigned personnel with confidence that belied her age. Her briefing was clear, comprehensive, and professionally delivered, covering mission objectives, individual responsibilities, and contingency plans with precision that could have come from any experienced leader. "Specialist Lopez, you'll provide medical support and serve as my second-in-command. Corporal Thompson, you have point position and navigation responsibility. Private Kim, you'll handle communications and security. Any questions about individual assignments?" The 3 soldiers exchanged glances, clearly surprised by her professional approach. Lopez nodded approval, while Thompson seemed to reassess his initial assumptions about working with a child. "Understood," Thompson replied for the group. The scenario began with routine movement through simulated enemy territory, but Kane quickly introduced complications designed to test Sarah's leadership under pressure. Equipment failures, changing intelligence, and simulated casualties created cascading problems that required immediate adaptation. Sarah's response to each challenge demonstrated tactical flexibility that impressed the observing officers. rather than becoming overwhelmed by multiple problems. She prioritized threats systematically while maintaining awareness of her team's capabilities and limitations. When Kane introduced a simulated medical emergency, Sarah immediately directed Lopez to treat the casualty while repositioning the team to provide security. Her coordination was smooth and professional, demonstrating understanding of military priorities that many soldiers struggled to master. Corporal Thompson, establish overwatch position. Private Kim, radio for medical evacuation. Specialist Lopez, treat and prepare for movement, she ordered, her voice remaining calm despite the artificial stress. Kane introduced additional complications, including simulated enemy contact and communications failures, but Sarah adapted to each new challenge without losing composure or effectiveness. Her leadership kept the team functioning as a unit despite mounting pressure. Most impressively, Sarah began anticipating Kane's stress tactics, adjusting her plans to account for likely complications before they occurred. Her proactive thinking demonstrated strategic awareness that exceeded her experience level. "She's thinking 3 steps ahead," Hayes observed quietly to Torres, who was documenting Sarah's performance for evaluation purposes. "More than that," Torres replied. "She's managing Kane's psychology as much as the tactical situation. She knows he's trying to break her, so she's staying ahead of his scenarios." The observation proved accurate when Sarah began implementing contingency plans that neutralized Kane's intended complications before they could create problems for her team. Her tactical innovation forced Kane to develop increasingly complex challenges to test her limits. The morning exercise concluded with Sarah successfully completing the reconnaissance mission despite every obstacle Kane had introduced. Her team had functioned effectively throughout the scenario, and her leadership had maintained unit cohesion under conditions that would challenge experienced soldiers. Kane's post-exercise debrief revealed grudging respect despite his initial skepticism. "Your tactical decision-making was sound," he admitted. "Your ability to maintain team effectiveness under pressure was noteworthy." Sarah accepted the assessment with professional courtesy. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." "What areas need improvement?" The question demonstrated exactly the kind of professional attitude that effective soldiers maintained, seeking feedback rather than satisfaction, focusing on development rather than validation. Communication under stress could be clearer. Kane replied, "And some of your tactical choices were overly cautious, though that may be appropriate given your team's composition." The constructive criticism was delivered with the same professional tone Kane used with experienced soldiers, indicating that he was beginning to evaluate Sarah based on performance rather than preconceptions. The afternoon session introduced weapons training, though adapted for Sarah's age with training rifles and simulated ammunition. Her marksmanship instruction would test hand-eye coordination, following safety protocols and maintaining accuracy under time pressure. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, the base's senior marksmanship instructor, conducted the weapons training with meticulous attention to safety and proper technique. Her reputation for developing skilled marksmen made her assessment particularly valuable for evaluating Sarah's potential. "Before we begin," Santos announced, "I want to emphasize that weapons training requires absolute discipline and attention to safety. Any deviation from proper procedures will result in immediate termination of this portion of your evaluation." Sarah nodded understanding, her expression reflecting the seriousness with which she approached weapons handling. Her father's instruction had included basic firearms safety, providing foundation knowledge that Santos quickly recognized during initial handling assessment. The training began with basic rifle positions and sight alignment using training weapons. Sarah's form was nearly perfect, demonstrating instruction that went beyond casual familiarity to genuine technical competence. Her muscle memory reflected hours of practice that impressed Santos immediately. "Who taught you shooting fundamentals?" Santos asked, noting Sarah's natural stance and grip. "My father and his team members," Sarah replied. "They emphasize safety and precision over speed." The emphasis on proper technique, rather than impressive performance, demonstrated exactly the kind of instruction that produced effective marksmen. Sarah's foundation was solid enough to build advanced skills upon. Live-fire training used .22 caliber rifles appropriate for Sarah's size and strength. Her first shots grouped tightly around the target center, indicating excellent hand-eye coordination and trigger control. Subsequent shots maintained consistent accuracy that would have been respectable for adult beginners. More importantly, Sarah demonstrated flawless safety discipline throughout the exercise. She maintained proper muzzle control, followed range commands immediately, and treated every weapon as though it were loaded, regardless of its actual condition. "Outstanding safety awareness," Santos commented as they concluded the marksmanship portion. "Your accuracy will improve with practice, but your discipline is already at professional level." The weapons training concluded with tactical reloading and malfunction clearing exercises that tested Sarah's ability to maintain performance under time pressure. Her movements were deliberate rather than fast, emphasizing accuracy over speed in ways that reflected proper training priorities. Kane observed the weapons training with particular interest, recognizing that marksmanship skills often revealed character traits that predicted military success. Sarah's patient, methodical approach impressed him more than rapid shooting would have. The day's final exercise involved what Hayes called leadership assessment. Sarah would be given command of a different team for a complex problem-solving scenario that required creative thinking and resource management rather than tactical movement. Her new team included 2 soldiers she hadn't worked with previously. Sergeant First Class Rachel Martinez, a logistics specialist with 10 years of experience, and Specialist James Wilson, a communications technician known for questioning authority. The team composition was designed to test Sarah's ability to earn respect from personnel who might be skeptical about her age and experience. "Your mission is to establish a forward operating base with limited resources and personnel," Kane explained. "You must prioritize construction, security, and communications, while managing competing requirements and resource limitations." The scenario required exactly the kind of strategic thinking and resource allocation that military leaders faced in real-world situations. Sarah would need to balance immediate needs against long-term objectives while motivating her team to accept difficult assignments. Sarah studied the available resources and terrain features before addressing her team. Her briefing demonstrated understanding of operational priorities that impressed Martinez, who had expected to work with someone whose military knowledge was superficial. "Sergeant Martinez, your logistics expertise makes you best qualified to prioritize construction requirements." Specialist Wilson, communications are critical for base security, so establishing contact with headquarters is your primary responsibility. "I'll coordinate overall priorities and handle security planning." Her assignments played to each person's strengths while ensuring all essential tasks were covered. More importantly, she had asked for input rather than simply issuing orders, demonstrating leadership style that encouraged collaboration. The exercise proceeded smoothly, with Sarah making tactical decisions that balanced competing requirements effectively. When resource limitations forced difficult choices, she explained her reasoning to the team, helping them understand how individual tasks supported overall objectives. Martinez found herself genuinely impressed by Sarah's leadership approach. The 9-year-old demonstrated understanding of military principles that many officers struggled to implement effectively. "She's not trying to prove she's in charge," Martinez observed to Wilson during a brief break. "She's actually leading." Wilson nodded agreement. "I expected attitude problems, but she listens to suggestions and makes good decisions." Their positive response reflected exactly the kind of team dynamics that effective military units required. Sarah had earned their cooperation through competence rather than demanding it through authority. The day concluded with Kane's comprehensive evaluation of Sarah's performance across all training areas. His assessment would strongly influence Colonel Rivera's decision about whether to continue her trial week. "Miss Chen," Kane said formally, "your performance today exceeded my expectations in every category. Your tactical thinking is sound, your leadership style is effective, and your ability to maintain performance under pressure is noteworthy." Sarah accepted the evaluation with the same professional courtesy she had maintained throughout the day. "Thank you, Master Sergeant. I'm grateful for the opportunity to train with your personnel." Kane's expression had transformed completely. From his initial skepticism, "You've earned the right to continue this evaluation. Tomorrow's challenges will test different capabilities, but today proved you belong here." As Sarah prepared to leave the training facility, she was approached by the soldiers who had worked with her throughout the day. Their comments reflected genuine respect rather than condescending encouragement. "You did good work today," Lopez told her. "I've worked with officers who weren't as clear in their communication." Thompson added, "Your tactical decisions were solid. You kept us working as a team instead of just following orders." The unsolicited praise from experienced personnel carried more weight than any official evaluation could provide. Sarah had earned acceptance from soldiers who judged performance rather than age, as Colonel Rivera reviewed the day's training reports. He found himself confronting evidence that contradicted every assumption he had made about Sarah's capabilities. Her performance wasn't just adequate for someone her age. It was exceptional by any standard. The 9-year-old girl who had demanded an impossible opportunity was systematically proving that his confident wager had been based on limitations that existed in his thinking rather than reality. Tomorrow would bring the final challenges that would determine whether Sarah Chen had truly earned her place among Fort Bragg's elite trainees, or whether today's success was just the beginning of something even more extraordinary. Asterisk. Wednesday brought the most challenging test of Sarah's trial week, but also an unexpected crisis that would demonstrate the true measure of her character. At 04:00 hours, Linda Chen received an emergency call that her father-in-law, retired Command Sergeant Major William Chen, had suffered a massive stroke and was fighting for his life at the base hospital. The timing couldn't have been more devastating, with only 2 days remaining in Sarah's evaluation. She faced the prospect of losing the family member who had been her strongest supporter and closest connection to her father's military legacy. William Chen had been Sarah's mentor throughout her preparation, the veteran soldier who had helped her understand military traditions and provided the emotional foundation for her entire journey. Now he lay unconscious in the intensive care unit, his condition critical enough that doctors were uncertain about his chances of recovery. When Sarah learned about her grandfather's condition, her response surprised everyone who had come to expect exceptional maturity from her. Rather than requesting postponement of her training, she insisted on continuing with the scheduled evaluation while spending every available moment at his bedside. "Grandpa would want me to finish what I started," she told her mother with quiet determination. "He taught me that soldiers don't quit when things get difficult. This is exactly when I need to prove his lessons took hold." The decision to continue training while processing family trauma demonstrated emotional compartmentalization that impressed even experienced military personnel. Sarah's ability to separate personal crisis from professional obligations reflected principles that many adults struggle to master. Dr. Patricia Valdez, the base psychologist assigned to monitor exceptional participants, evaluated Sarah's emotional state and concluded that continuing with training might actually provide therapeutic structure during her grandfather's health crisis. The military environment could offer stability and purpose that would help her process the situation constructively. "She's using discipline and routine to manage overwhelming emotions," Dr. Valdez explained to Colonel Rivera. "For someone with her personality and preparation, Completing this trial may be psychologically healthier than sitting helplessly in a hospital waiting room. Rivera found himself faced with an unprecedented situation, a 9-year-old demonstrating exactly the kind of commitment to mission completion that military service required, even under circumstances that would excuse anyone from lesser obligations. Wednesdays. Training had been designed as the week's most comprehensive assessment, combining physical challenges, tactical problem-solving, and leadership responsibilities into a single complex evaluation. Hayes had created what she privately called the ultimate test, a scenario that would push Sarah's capabilities to their absolute limits. The exercise involved establishing and defending a forward operating position against simulated enemy forces. Sarah would command a mixed team of volunteers while managing limited resources, changing tactical situations and time pressures that would test every skill she had demonstrated throughout the week. Her team included 8 experienced soldiers from different military specialties, creating the most complex leadership challenge she had faced. The group dynamics would test her ability to coordinate diverse personalities and expertise, while maintaining unit effectiveness under combat-simulated stress. Master Sergeant Kane briefed the scenario with military precision that emphasized the exercise's demanding nature. Your mission is to establish defensive positions, repel enemy attacks, and maintain operational capability for 72 hours with limited supplies and personnel, he explained to Sarah. You'll face equipment failures, casualty situations, and tactical complications that require immediate adaptation. Sarah studied the terrain maps and resource inventories with the same methodical approach she had used throughout her trial. Her analysis revealed strategic thinking that had evolved significantly during her 3 days of intensive training. "What communication assets do we have with higher headquarters?" she asked. "Limited radio contact, subject to interference and equipment failure," Kane replied. "Rules of engagement for defensive operations. Standard row. Threat assessment is your responsibility." The tactical questions demonstrated understanding of operational planning that impressed the observing officers. Sarah was thinking like a military commander. Rather than simply following instructions, her team briefing was comprehensive and professionally delivered, covering individual assignments, contingency plans, and coordination procedures with clarity that could have come from any experienced leader. More significantly, she had adapted her leadership style based on lessons learned during previous exercises. "Sergeant Martinez, your logistics experience makes you my operations officer. Staff Sergeant Williams, you'll coordinate defensive positions and fire control. Specialist Chen, communications are your priority. Maintain contact with all team elements and headquarters." The assignments reflected understanding of military organization that went beyond theoretical knowledge to practical application. Sarah had learned to leverage individual strengths while ensuring all essential functions were covered. The exercise began with routine defensive preparation, but Kane quickly introduced complications designed to test Sarah's crisis management capabilities. Equipment failures, intelligence updates, and personnel problems created cascading challenges that required immediate tactical adaptation. Sarah's response to each new crisis demonstrated leadership maturity that exceeded her experience level. Rather than becoming overwhelmed by multiple problems, she prioritized threats systematically while maintaining awareness of her team's morale and capabilities. When Kane simulated a medical emergency involving multiple casualties, Sarah immediately implemented triage procedures while repositioning her remaining personnel to maintain defensive integrity. Her coordination was smooth and decisive, demonstrating understanding of military priorities under extreme pressure. Medic to the casualty collection point. Sergeant Martinez, redistribute ammunition and supplies. Staff Sergeant Williams, adjust defensive positions to account for reduced personnel. She ordered, her voice remaining calm despite the artificial chaos. The observing officers found themselves unconsciously holding their breath as they watched a 9-year-old manage a tactical situation that would challenge experienced company commanders. Her performance was not just adequate, it was exemplary by any military standard. Most impressively, Sarah began anticipating problems before they developed, implementing preventive measures that reduced the impact of Kane's intended complications. Her proactive thinking demonstrated strategic awareness that many officers never developed. She's not just responding to the scenario, Sergeant Major Hayes observed to Torres. She's controlling it. The observation proved accurate as Sarah's tactical innovations forced Kane to develop increasingly complex challenges to test her limits. Her ability to stay ahead of artificial complications while maintaining team effectiveness exceeded every expectation that had been established for her evaluation. The scenario's climax involved a simulated enemy assault that would test Sarah's ability to coordinate defensive operations under maximum stress. Her team's survival would depend on her tactical decisions and leadership effectiveness during the most challenging portion of the exercise. Sarah's management of the simulated combat was flawless. She coordinated fire control, managed ammunition distribution, and maintained communication with all team elements while adapting to rapidly changing tactical conditions. Her leadership kept the team functioning as a coordinated unit despite intense pressure. When the exercise concluded with successful mission completion, the observing personnel fell silent. They had witnessed something unprecedented. A 9-year-old girl commanding experienced soldiers through complex tactical operations with competence that would have impressed senior officers. Kane's post-exercise evaluation reflected the transformation in his assessment of Sarah's capabilities. "Miss Chen, your performance today was exceptional by any military standard," he said formally. "Your tactical decision-making, leadership effectiveness, and ability to maintain performance under extreme pressure demonstrate capabilities that exceed those of many experienced officers." Sarah accepted the evaluation with characteristic humility. "Thank you, Master Sergeant. Mindful for the opportunity to train with your personnel." The afternoon brought unexpected news that would influence the final evaluation of Sarah's trial week. General Patricia Morrison, the Pentagon's senior officer for personnel development, had arrived at Fort Bragg to observe Sarah's training and assess the implications of her performance for military policy. Morrison's presence transformed what should have been the final day's assessment into something resembling a formal military evaluation. The general had come to determine whether Sarah's achievement represented an individual exception or evidence that age-based restrictions were limiting military potential unnecessarily. "Colonel Rivera," Morrison said during their private briefing, "what I've read about this young lady's performance suggests we may need to reconsider some fundamental assumptions about capability and readiness." Rivera nodded, recognizing that Sarah's success had implications that extended far beyond Fort Bragg. Her achievement was forcing military leadership to examine policies that had been accepted without question for decades. Thursday's final evaluation had been designed as a comprehensive demonstration of everything Sarah had learned during her trial week. She would face physical challenges, tactical problems, and leadership responsibilities in a single, integrated assessment that would determine whether she had truly earned her place in the advanced program. The test began before dawn with a demanding physical fitness assessment that would establish whether Sarah's conditioning was adequate for continued participation. She completed every requirement with performance that exceeded standards established for adult soldiers, demonstrating preparation that had been refined through months of systematic training. More significantly, her attitude throughout the physical testing reflected the professional mindset that military service required. She pushed herself to maximum effort without complaint or dramatic display, focusing on meeting standards rather than impressing observers. The tactical portion of the Evaluation involved planning and executing a reconnaissance mission with a team of volunteer soldiers. Sarah would be responsible for mission success, while demonstrating the leadership skills that had impressed personnel throughout her trial week. Her mission planning was meticulous and comprehensive, covering contingencies and alternative approaches, with thoroughness that reflected genuine tactical understanding. Her briefing to the team was clear, professional, and delivered with confidence that inspired trust among her personnel. The mission execution was flawless. Sarah led her team through complex terrain while managing communications, navigation, and security with competence that would have impressed experienced commanders. Her performance validated every positive assessment that had been made during her trial week. When the evaluation concluded with complete mission success, General Morrison approached Sarah personally to discuss her experience and motivations. The conversation would influence policy decisions that could affect military families throughout the entire service structure. "Sarah, what you've accomplished this week is unprecedented in military training history," Morrison said. "You've demonstrated that exceptional preparation and determination can overcome barriers that we previously considered immutable." "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah replied. "I hope I've honored my father's memory and proven that his daughter was worthy of the chance Colonel Rivera gave me." The reference to her father's legacy and her gratitude toward Rivera captured the character qualities that had made Sarah's achievement possible. Her success reflected not just individual capability, but family values and institutional courage that had supported exceptional performance. Colonel Rivera faced the moment he had anticipated since making his confident wager 5 days earlier. Sarah had not only completed every challenge in his modified training program, she had consistently exceeded standards that would have challenged experienced soldiers. "Sarah," he said formally, "based on your performance throughout this evaluation, it is my assessment that you have not only met every adjusted standard we established, but have demonstrated capabilities that qualify you for acceptance into the full Advanced Combat Readiness program." The announcement was followed by spontaneous applause from the personnel who had observed Sarah's journey throughout the week. Her achievement had earned genuine respect from soldiers who judged performance rather than age. Sarah's response reflected the maturity that had characterized her entire trial. "Thank you, sir. I understand that acceptance into the program represents the beginning of greater responsibility rather than the completion of my development." General Morrison stepped forward to address the broader implications of Sarah's success. "Miss Chen, what you've achieved will influence military policy at the highest levels," she explained. "You've proven that exceptional readiness can transcend conventional age limitations when properly identified and supported." The general's words carried weight that extended far beyond Sarah's individual case. Her success had initiated policy discussions that would create opportunities for other exceptional military children who possessed similar capabilities and determination. As the formal evaluation concluded, Sarah was approached by soldiers who had worked with her throughout the week. Their comments reflected genuine admiration for what she had accomplished while maintaining the professional relationships that military service required. "You earned this," Master Sergeant Kane told her. "Nobody gave you anything because of your age or situation. You proved you belong here through performance." Staff Sergeant Torres added, "I've trained hundreds of soldiers, and I've never seen anyone demonstrate better discipline and determination than you've shown this week." The praise from experienced military personnel carried more weight than any official recognition could provide. Sarah had not only achieved her goal of honoring her father's memory, she had earned acceptance into an elite, community-based, purely on merit and capability. The visit to her grandfather's hospital room that evening provided the perfect conclusion to Sarah's remarkable week. William Chen had regained consciousness and been informed about his granddaughter's unprecedented achievement. "Did you finish what you started?" he asked weakly, but with obvious pride. "Yes, Grandpa. I completed every challenge they gave me. Then you've honored your father and proven that Chen family soldiers don't quit when things get difficult," he said, using the family phrase that had sustained her throughout the trial. 3 months later, Sarah Chen stood before a gathering of military educators from across the United States, delivering a presentation about her experience that would re-influence youth development programs throughout the Department of Defense. At 9 years old, she had become the youngest person ever accepted into an elite military training program. But more importantly, she had proven that institutional courage to test assumptions could unlock potential that conventional wisdom might. Overlooked, her achievement had initiated policy changes that created pathways for other exceptional military children who demonstrated similar readiness and capability. The program she had fought to enter had evolved into a model for identifying and developing talent regardless of age when preparation and ability warranted consideration. Colonel Rivera sat in the audience, reflecting on the transformation that had occurred since Sarah first appeared outside his office with an impossible request. His confident bet against her success had become one of the most valuable lessons of his military career, teaching him that effective leadership sometimes required challenging assumptions about limitation and possibility. The 9-year-old girl, who had demanded an unprecedented opportunity, had not only earned that chance through exceptional performance, she had opened doors that would benefit military families for generations to come. Her father's legacy lived on, not through grief or anger, but through excellence that honored service and sacrifice while creating new possibilities for others who possessed the courage to attempt the extraordinary. Sarah Chen had proven that sometimes the most profound changes in military institutions began with a single individual who refused to accept that barriers were permanent, and who found leaders with the wisdom to support unprecedented achievement wherever it appeared. Her story would inspire others to recognize that potential has no age limit when preparation meets opportunity and determination overcomes every obstacle. The end.